This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm the journalist on the Guardian Higher Education Network. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a site which is kind of separate from the main news site. It kind of runs like a blog, and so we have professionals in higher education writing for us. I also write news stories. We kind of cover the topics that aren't always reported on the main news desk, so we kind of try and delve a little bit deeper into the issues that are going on in higher education. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself, and then perhaps we'll go on to talking about how I use social media in higher education on The Guardian, and also what's the best way to blog for us, and perhaps what's the best way to blog as an academic. So I've worked on the Higher Education Network for a year and a half now. I did a Master's in Journalism at Goldsmiths, and my role in the network was to kind of engage the higher education community. So we wanted to encourage academics to write for the site, to talk about all kinds of things really, from policy pieces to personal stories. Our site is mainly aimed at people who work in higher education from all over the world, and we're really at the moment trying to grow our international audience. Although we do tend to focus on higher education policy in the UK, but we're always kind of looking for academics to write for us on kind of international issues, mainly to do with higher education. So I also commission, run all the social media on higher education. I also chair a fortnightly discussion, which we run kind of live Q&As fortnightly, although sometimes it kind of varies. So these are kind of on issues which are certain issues which we feel that a lot of people are talking about, or it's spin off from a main news story. And so I kind of come up with a discussion idea, and then I recruit about 8 to 10 panelists who are normally experts in that field, and they debate online on a Friday from 12 till 2 to talk about that discussion. And those are normally quite heated debates. They're really, I think it's a great way of academics getting involved. I also kind of run a debate at the same time on Twitter, just to involve those people who can't also join in. And they're kind of really great. And if you want to know when the live chats are going to come up, if you kind of sign up to become a member of the Higher Education Network, which is free, and we just send out a weekly newsletter and we cover it in there. So what I've noticed over the past year is a change in perception of social media by academics. When I started back in 2012, we had 15,000 Twitter followers. A year and a half later, we now have 64,000 Twitter followers. And I think that kind of really reflects a change in the way that academics view social media. I think in the beginning academics were reluctant to join in debates, kind of via online discussions or online, just for fear of being misunderstood. And I think because obviously you're restricted by the 140 characters, and so, but I think that it's kind of, and I think they feared of not being able to elaborate or express their views or being misinterpreted. But now we have 64,000 Twitter followers, and I think academics are far more willing to engage online and share their views, and I've definitely noticed quite a change. So let's talk about why academics use social media and blog. These are kind of my suggestions, and I hope this is kind of very much a two-way street, and you can ask me questions, just feel free, put up your hand. From running the site, this is kind of why I think academics use social media. So for public engagement, which is quite a broad term, but I think mainly talking about, this is not just about broadcasting your research, but also kind of getting critical feedback from your peers. Outreach opportunities, things like cross-collaboration or research partnerships, mentoring opportunities, kind of supporting social enterprise, research, measuring research impact, so the thing to do with altmetrics. Obviously this is kind of, this concept has its critics, and not everyone kind of perhaps uses this at the moment, but a lot of people say it's another way to see how the public or other academics kind of interact and engage with your research. So you might have heard of a new thing that started called Twernal Of, which is the world's first Twitter journal, launched by Andy Meyer, and he's encouraging academics to share their original peer-reviewed research on social media. And with the kind of mindset that highly tweeted papers are highly cited and than those that are less shared on social media. So there are many kind of new developments in this area. And I also think that academics blog or use social media to engage in debate. So with academics worldwide, there's not just academics within your institutions, and to voice opinion on policy, to comment on other academics' blogs, and also for gossip. I think it's also always interesting to know what's going on in your sector, what people are talking about. I don't know if you read this article, but this about the Vice Chancellor of University of Northampton crowd surfing at Student Unions Award. So kind of I caught onto this from Twitter, and a lot of students and academics were talking about this. So I think Twitter's not always used for a serious purpose. Sometimes it's just to mock or chat about things that are going on. So social media at The Guardian. So I use it to engage with the higher education community mainly, but also to pick up on news stories. So I use it to tweet out blogs, all the blogs that we publish on our site. I also use it to kind of gauge a reaction on a piece. So I might tweet it out in very different ways, and kind of ask for people to respond to the piece that we published. And I also use it to commission as well. So a lot of academics tweet their blogs at me to say that they have their own blog, and they said, I've just written this new piece, you might be interested in it, and I do sometimes republish blogs as well. So I think, and I also use, so also a good way to engage with the kind of community and also to attract people to your site, I think is to include different hashtags. So different hashtags are centered around certain communities. So these are a few useful ones which you may be already aware of, and I'm sure there's plenty more that you can use. So if you kind of include a hashtag within your tweet, say if you included hashtag ECR chat, so that obviously stands for Early Career Researcher, that's quite a lively community, and loads of people use that at the end of their tweets, and then that kind of like collates all these people together, and then they start chatting on these pieces. So if you have a piece that's specifically aimed at early career researchers or postdocs, then it's always kind of good to include that hashtag. And similar to Prof Chat and PhD Chat, and there's kind of loads of different variations. And the other handles, Pat Thompson, and the other ones, they're kind of quite lively tweeters, and they always have some kind of interesting things to say, so I think sometimes it's worth following them. But I'm sure there's plenty more you can add to this list. Those hashtags are the ones that I mainly use, and I feel that they're the ones that are most active and get the kind of most engagement. You can also use TweetDeck. I don't know how many of you use TweetDeck. Show of hand. Yeah. So that's quite a useful way to just keep track of everything that's going on, really. So you can set up these columns, which you can see there. So this is just an example. So I've used hashtag PhD chat, and then that draws in everyone who's then included that handle in their tweet. So it's kind of an easy way to just scan through, and then that's updated whenever there's a new tweet. But you can also use it to have columns of your most followed person or news organisation or anything like that. And you can have as many as you want that goes along, and you can move them around, and it's quite a good way, quite addictive as well. So if you were interested in writing for The Guardian, if you're interested in blogging, this is what I would recommend. I think the same rules probably apply to perhaps writing on your own blog if you're interested in that, but I think these are this is the kind of guidelines that I normally set for academics who want to blog for us. So I think it's really important to have a clear news hook. I think it doesn't always have to be news related, but it needs to be current. So something that people are talking about. There's got to be a reason why I'm going to publish that now, or why you want to talk about that now. I think then it really needs to be a clear argument. This should be summed up within the first 1 or 2 paragraphs. If it takes the reader until the 5th paragraph to actually know what you're talking about, then they're probably going to not have bothered to read down that far in the first place. I think you just need to draw in the reader straight away. And I think this does differ if you have it on your own blog. I think you have a loyal audience perhaps that go to your blog, and maybe it's different. But I know for The Guardian, people lose interest very, very quickly. Most people only stay on a site for about 30 seconds, and so you've really got to kind of catch their attention very, very quickly. And normally you can do that by, within the first par, just kind of mentioning an interesting or a shocking statistic, or start off with a statement, or start off with an anecdote, or something that just kind of really draws the reader in straight away, rather than kind of providing context for the first 4 paragraphs about what is going on in higher education, because I think most people do tend to know about that, and that's always interesting to include that a little bit further down. And then make sure it's well researched. Include recent stats where possible, and make sure that you provide the links to them, and make it critical, make it engaging, and make it colourful as well. The best ones are the ones that include anecdotes, and kind of just have a more personal touch to them. And it doesn't really stop, for me, it doesn't really stop once the piece is published. That's the first stage. Once it's published, it's then time to see the reaction, and then it's time to engage with your community. So that's when this works for both how I do it and how you can do it. So once you publish the piece, then tweet it out, and then tweet it out using those different hashtags. So if it's something that's particularly related to professors, say, then tweet it out using hashtag ProfChat, and things like that, or tweet it out to specific people who you know, find out what their Twitter handle is, and just include their handle in the tweet, and then that will come up on their Twitter feed, and they might then be interested in it, and they'll be like, oh, interesting you want to hear a reaction from this specific person. It's kind of a good way of being quite direct. Also, I guess Facebook as well. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you use Facebook, but actually we found that a large majority of our pieces absolutely fly on Facebook, and Twitter's kind of more for engagement. So specifically if it's kind of more human interest. So human interest stories and personal stories do really, really well on Facebook. Yes, and I think there's always something just to be wary of plagiarism of your work by news websites. I know that there are a few cases, and a few people have blogged for us about it, saying that a news organisation or someone else, another website, has seen a blog that you've posted, and they've decided to take that information and turn it into their own news story without citing you or without linking back to the post, which obviously can be very frustrating. I don't think there are actually any kind of copyright laws around that, but I think, and it's a hard one to really offer advice, but I think for us anyway, we always make sure that if we're interested in your blog, we'd always contact you and say, we'd like to republish your blog, and put a link back to where it was originally published. So these are the most talked about blogs. I think they're quite a good example of what makes a good blog. So I don't know if you've seen the pieces that we've done about mental health recently. I don't know if this is going to work either. Okay. Well, that's not very helpful, but I'll talk about it anyway. So we're running a new Academics Anonymous series, and I think this is the 13th week that we've run it, and so we publish these articles every Saturday. And they are kind of talking about, this is where academics write to us anonymously and blog something about the frustrations, the trials and tribulations of working in higher education, and we do get inundated, as you can imagine. But we had one, someone sent in one about mental health, and it was about there being a culture of acceptance around mental health in academia, and it absolutely flew. It's had over 500,000 views. It was 4th most read on The Guardian for quite a long period of time. It's had something like 65,000 Facebook shares and thousands of retweets. Loads of comments. I received about 300 emails following that response with people saying, thank you for publishing this, is a really important issue. I really can really relate to this piece. And I think the reason, apart from the actual subject area, I think the reason why it flew was just because it was really personal, and I think a lot of people could just relate to it, and it was just written in it didn't really use academic language, it just used clear, accessible language. It just told it how it is, and yeah, I think obviously it's an issue, a massive issue that we've just kind of like delved into, and I co-wrote a feature following that, which also had 300,000 views, and so it's a big issue, and we're now doing a survey on it and looking into it more. But that's just one blog, and kind of that's the response that it sparked. So sometimes you can't predict that, but it was really, really interesting to see how great a response that got. We did a piece on my life as a woman professor, so anything to do with gender and academia kind of normally does quite well. And this was a woman who, I think she was maybe in her 60s, and I think she worked at Cambridge University as professor, but anyway, I think it was talking about the gender divide and just about the lack of career progression for women. And we have run quite a few pieces on that, but that one particularly, and still today, still does really well. Another piece on studying a PhD, about not suffering in silence. This was by the head of counselling at Oxford University. Wrote a piece kind of about PhD students seeking support. Anything on PhD students seems to absolutely fly at the moment. I think we've provided a platform for a lot of kind of young academics to voice their concerns, and it seems that there are plenty. We have a lot of concerns. And then, yeah, a couple more. This one, Open Access Publishing hoax. I don't know if you saw this one last year about Science Magazine, who revealed, I can't remember what. I think they published an article about the fact that loads of different journals around the world had published a specific article which was fake, and it was all a hoax, and it was all set up, and it was kind of supposed to show up a big hole that was in the publishing system. So that we had an academic who decided to write a response piece to that, and kind of criticised the way that Science Magazine went around exposing this hoax. So that was quite an interesting piece, and another one on teaching religion. So this was another Academics Anonymous piece. And this was a teacher who felt that she couldn't run her course in the way that she wanted to because of loads of students' unions and religious groups, like societies and things, having quite an impact on how the course was run, and she felt like she couldn't talk about her secular views, and everything was kind of being forced around.
Is that one also anonymous, the last one?
The last one was anonymous, yeah.
Would it be kind of easy to figure it out, though?
Um,
The professors, based on the course?
I don't think so, because it doesn't mention the university. The only thing it mentions is that it was a Russell Group university, and that was it. So we do kind of try our best to make sure that they can't kind of be traced. But I think, I mean, if you would try really, really hard, then you might be able to. But yeah. Oh. Okay, so those are kind of, and all those blogs got between 30,000 to 500,000 views, so which is pretty high. And I think it just shows kind of what an impact a blog can have. And these are just academics who are sending in ideas and writing for us. So I think obviously the platform of The Guardian really helps to give it the visibility. But I think it's also about great ideas, and I think the Higher Education Network, although I do write stories, I'm not pretending to know everything about everything that goes on in higher education, and that's why we want more and more articles coming from the sector, because you're the ones that are in it, and you're the ones that are networking and engaging with everyone, so you're the ones that know what needs to be talked about, really. So open to questions. Pretty sure I haven't covered everything. Yeah.
Say a bit more about how you would differentiate between using a Twitter handle and a Twitter hashtag, the purposes for which you'd use the different things. Would one be for the community of a certain community or a certain issue, whereas for the other you'd be after particular Twitter subscribers?
Yeah, so a handle is what you would have when you sign up. You have a Twitter handle, so that is to a specific person. So you'd only ever use that if you wanted to tweet directly at someone. Whether a hashtag is something that everyone can use, and it doesn't really matter. Like, you don't have to belong to anything or a group or anything. You can just add it on, and it just kind of feeds in, so that everyone who has used that hashtag, especially if you've got it on TweetDeck, everyone, then you can see people who have used PhD chat in the middle, so everyone's got the hashtag on it, so it just kind of draws in all those tweets together, and so yeah, people kind of will pick up on it, whoever is following that particular hashtag.
If you follow the hashtag of Social Scholar, you'll get all the ones that relate to this, as an example.
Yeah.
Apart from Twitter and Facebook, what others do you use? What do you do them?
I use them the most, but I do also use LinkedIn. I'm not particularly sure how useful LinkedIn is. I think it's partly because I don't really understand it that much. I think it's quite a difficult site to use. I think the main reason why people join it is supposed to be for professional networking, and I've joined it, and I have very, very strange requests from people that I've never met before, nothing to do with any of the sectors of education or anything, of my past. So it's a strange one. I do post interesting articles on there, and we do have a Guardian Higher Education group. I know sometimes it is perhaps useful for groups. I'm sure like your individual universities will have LinkedIn groups, and I guess it's a way, I think it's a good way for universities to kind of get all their alumni together. But yeah, to be honest, I'm not really sure how useful it is. You can send out announcements sometimes, and that's useful. So I don't know if you kind of, I send out announcements to encourage people to join our live chats. So if I'm looking for panelists, I'll send it out, and then that goes out to all the people that are following in that particular group. But I think as a professional or an academic, I'm not sure how useful it is for blogging or kind of promoting your own work. It's always worth giving it a go, but I think mainly it's better for just maybe a bit of networking or hunting for new jobs, maybe.
So if you want to position yourself as a consultant,
Yeah.
then it's to generate consultancy income, it can be a good way of presenting yourself to particular client groups.
Yeah.
What expertise.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, that sounds like a good way of using it. Yeah.
You mentioned before issues with plagiarism and websites potentially taking you one person, listing them and learning without crediting you. How could a person protect against that?
I think it's really, really difficult because unless there's laws in place, then I don't really know how you kind of stop it. I know that the early career researcher who wrote for us about it said that when that happened, I think her piece was published. It was her blog was about I think women in the Victorian era, so it's very, very niche, and she'd done some kind of picture gallery, and the Daily Mail had taken the gallery and taken some of the stuff that she'd used but not credited to her, and that actually put her off it, and she closed down her whole blog for about a year, and then she decided to kind of open it up again, and she said, well, you know, there's nothing I can do to stop this, but this shouldn't stop me from blogging. You know, I really, really like blogging. I really like sharing my research on this platform. I think, and she did contact the news organisation, she contacted the journalists, but they just didn't respond. And I think that, you know, the best thing to do, I guess, is contact whoever has republished your piece and say, can you make sure you credit it to me? But if you can't get through to them, I think, unfortunately, I don't think there's much you can do, really. But I don't think it should put you off, and I don't really know how much that happens. I don't know how common it is.
A reputable news organisation wouldn't do that, you would think.
Well, yeah. I'd hope so.
On the other hand, copyright is automatic. So every piece published on the web is copyrighted, really, because copyright is automatic. You don't need to put the set symbol to indicate that this is copyrighted material.
Yeah.
Everything is copyrighted. Everything.
But then,
that's the law.
Yeah.
So the law protects the author, but you can regulate how others may use your content.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, your recourse would be to actually sue.
Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously in the position that some people are in, then I think her against Daily Mail, I'm not sure. It's difficult.
So in terms of pitching, do you generally want just like a paragraph saying what the piece is going to do, or do you want the whole thing? And who do we actually send it to specifically?
Yeah, no, that's a good question about pitching. I tend to not want any more than 200 words. I think you can sum up your argument pretty clearly within that amount of words. So I think it's just maybe a sentence introducing yourself, your position, your university, and then just say a couple of sentences just outlining your argument. Say, you know, I want to talk about the culture of acceptance around mental health issues in academia. This is why, and then kind of just break it down to a few bullet points just to explain how you plan to structure that piece. Maybe just saying, I will include this particular report. I'll get, I don't know, comments from this person if that was applicable, but it might not be. Or I'll just mention this and this and this, and that'll be it. I think sometimes I do get people sending me their first draft of a blog, and you know that is fine to do. It's just that I think we kind of want things written in a particular way, so sometimes that does waste your time if you then have to kind of go back and then redraft it again. But I mean, it depends how confident you are with your piece, I guess. But I really kind of need to stress that I don't want anything over 700 words, really. I do get people sending things that are like 2,000-3,000 words, and you know, we hardly have anyone at The Guardian writing that long, so it's just people, even on the web, it's not to do with space, it's just the fact that it's just very long and people don't kind of read right to the end.
And where should we send it?
Oh, to me. I probably should have put up my email address, that would have been really helpful. It's claire.shaw@theguardian.com. And my name is spelt like that. So that would have been helpful. Yeah.
I have a question. How will you come up with the ideas for the discussions, the formal discussions?
How do I come up with the ideas?
Yes. for the
So either it's a spin-off from a main news story, so if there's been something, say, about international recruitment in the news, then I might to start, and I think that actually that news story hasn't really covered many of the issues, and I kind of think of a way to open the discussion up, and then write a short introduction and recruit a panellist that way. Or otherwise, sometimes I just go on what people pitched me as well. If loads of people are pitching the same kind of stories about a particular issue, then it's obvious that we need to talk about this more. So it changes really. Yeah, but I mean, I'm always open to ideas, so if you have an idea for a discussion that you think should be had in The Guardian, then obviously get in touch and let me know.
Do you prefer those pictures to come from academics rather than, say, a press office of the university, or do you find either way? Do you prefer that kind of direct contact with them, or not?
Yeah, I think direct contact always helps, just because it speeds up the whole process. But, I'm happy to receive pictures from press officers as well. I think sometimes it's quite good if a press officer does pitch to me to kind of CC in the academic as well, and I think that then everyone's on the same page and there's no cross wires, and yeah, that's quite a good way of doing it.
You mentioned academics, but what about other staff that work at universities, which need professional support?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. We actually have quite a lot of professional support staff writing for us as well. And we had one recently by a press officer at Birkbeck, yes. Thanks. Talking about their responsibility in helping kind of boosting the visibility of women in the media. And that was quite an interesting piece. I don't think that's kind of covered before. We always talk about why women aren't in the media and why women aren't vocal and that kind of thing. But she was saying that actually, press officers probably do have a responsibility, and they can actually, instead of perhaps going for the same person who always is willing to offer a comment or a quote, they could ask someone else and make sure that they go to as many women as they do men and all that kind of stuff. So I think just anything that's you think is, of interest to the rest of higher education, or something that you feel is being talked about a lot, and and that you'd like to kind of, I guess, hear a response from others. But yeah, it's not limited to academics at all.
Can I ask a question about
Sorry?
starting up the blog on sort of the Guardian Energy Network? So how did you go? How was it promoted and pushed so that it sort of got to where it is?
Yeah. So I guess I came in. It's 3 years old, and I came in halfway through. It's it almost runs like a startup, to be honest. I think in the beginning, no one really knew what was going to happen. You don't really know if these things are going to be a success or not, because it's very, very different. No other news organisation is actually doing something similar to this. So it still runs like a startup in a way. I kind of always still coming up with new series, like Academics Anonymous, but you don't know how successful they're going to be. So you just kind of go on your instincts, and then sometimes you just have to phase something out and then have to move on to something else. So in that way, it's quite exciting, because it's always changing, it's always adapting, and as the community in higher education changes, then we have to change too. So the fact that academics and everyone else who works in higher education are far more engaged now, that kind of really helps us, and we can run far more live chats and live discussions like that, because people are willing to actually contribute and debate, and that's why we open up more things on Facebook and Twitter as well, and we've just seen a massive increase in the number of academics wanting to blog for us as well, which is really a great sign, and it shows that kind of academics are more interested in and joining the debate really, and and they're not as perhaps, I don't know, reluctant to have their opinions kind of critiqued by their own peers, which I think was a concern in the beginning. And, you know, I think it's one of those things that it's really difficult. I have it as a journalist, I have it all the time. You publish a piece and loads of people come in and you get trolls and you get people saying that, you know, you should talk to this person, this is not, this is a really rubbish piece, or, you know, and just saying things. And it's really difficult to take, and it's one of those things, as a journalist, you get used to it and you just kind of tend not to read the comments, or read them and then learn from them as well. But I think as someone who's, you know, not used to being in that kind of, not used to publishing pieces on a national news organisation, you know, you can put yourself in quite a vulnerable position. So I think, you know, if you're going to write something that's very, very critical, be sure that you can handle the response as well. Yeah.
Quick question. When you receive this, whether you publish it or not, do you respond back to say, well, I don't want to publish that for this reason, or that would be a good story for another occasion? Do you go back to the writers to provide some feedback?
Yeah, I do. But at the moment, I have 800 unread emails. So it gets to the stage where I do want to reply to everyone, but sometimes it just can't happen just because of the sheer workload. But I think the main thing, if I haven't responded within a couple of weeks, just send me another email, and just maybe make the subject line really clear about what you're going to write about, because then that would just kind of draw my eye to it. But yeah, I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't be offended if I don't respond to you. It's probably just because I haven't had time to do it, and resend it again. But yeah, I always do try to, anyway, respond to pictures and say how we can develop it. If I think that there's like a nugget of an idea there, I'm just like, yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I think perhaps you've taken the wrong, you know, course, so maybe we should go this way and talk about this. So yeah, I'm always open to kind of working with the author on it.
As well as the Guardian's brand and the increased interest in social media and academics, why do you think your Twitter followers increased so much? Can you give any advice about the best practice you did, how many tweets a day, how many were yours, how many were other links, how many retweets, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are 16 networks in our kind of group, which is kind of called Guardian Professional, and higher education does seem to have done really, really well with the Twitter followers. I don't know anyone else who's kind of their Twitter followers have flown as much. So it's hard to know really. I think it's a lot to do with the change in, and I guess more academics are now on Twitter, so that helps. But I think it's about promoting debate, really. I think that maybe that is why. So I don't just tweet out the headline of a story and then leave it, and that's it. So it's not, the Twitter feed shouldn't just be like headline, headline, headline. It's kind of about picking out really interesting quotes within the blog and putting that on Facebook and saying, you know, something that's kind of quite provocative, or something that people will, or an interesting statistic, or something that people will want to debate and talk about. And I guess asking the community to get involved, asking for feedback, retweeting other academics, their blogs, their tweets. You know, this shouldn't just be all about us tweeting all the time. You should want to, if you're supposed to be fully, you know, engaged with the community, then retweet them, and yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint exactly why it's done so well, but I think kind of a mixture of those things.
Did you learn as you went along, or did you create some kind of a guide which you followed in terms of how many times you're trying to engage in a day, or around one blog post? You'd put it out there and then you'd interact with it and have a life of its own. Did you just do that organically, or did you set yourself a target of how many times you'd refer to one blog post and have that conversation around it?
I think I do it more organically, really. Again, everything's kind of a bit of trial and error. So we have software which shows us how the piece is being viewed. So where the traffic's being drawn in from. So is it from the Guardian site? Is it from Twitter? Is it from Facebook? Is it where in the world is it are people looking at that? Are people reading the piece? So you can tell from that if suddenly that 50% of people are viewing it and accessing it via Twitter, then you should tweet out loads more. But if the majority of people are actually accessing it through The Guardian, then maybe there's other ways that you can kind of engage them, and maybe it's going in the comments section of the piece. So I think it kind of varies, and some pieces you just know will do really well on Twitter just because of the headline, and I think it's just one of those things that you kind of get to grips with. But I think for academics or anyone in higher education blogging, I think it's all about choosing like a short, snappy headline that really will draw in the readers. You don't want anything too long, because I think it just doesn't have the same kind of impact.
So this morning I told one of, I'm a communications officer.
Okay.
So one of the academics I was coming along to this talk. He was like, now I've got a question for you, Agnes. What kind of audiences am I going to reach if I blog? Basically saying what's the point for me personally as a researcher doing it.
Okay.
Academic research papers are peer reviewed, they're respected, you can see who's cited them, this kind of thing. And I got stumbled a little bit on how I could tell you which audiences we're reaching with our project blog. Because I can only see the countries where people are.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know if you have any tips on how I should respond to my research.
So this is about the particular project that you're working on at the moment. And that's a research project.
That's a research project. But he was talking about blogging in general.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess, blogging and using social media shouldn't be a chore. You do it because you want to do it, and you do it because you want a reaction. So if you're not that bothered about it, then don't do it, to be honest. It's kind of, it's up to you, really. The more you put in, the more work you put in, the more you tweet, the more you get out of it. So it's, you can't send out one tweet and then 4 weeks later send out another tweet and expect to have been inundated with kind of response. It doesn't really work like that. It's quite hard work, which maybe that's another reason why the higher education Twitter feed is kind of grown, because I guess we use it all day, every day. You can schedule tweets on TweetDeck, which you can then put over the weekend or at night, so that people around the world, when they wake up, they can use it. So yeah, scheduling tweets is always quite a good idea. But yeah, there's kind of, I guess, no limits. It's difficult to say like why you should use it. I guess the reasons I gave in the beginning are why I think and why people told me why they use it. And that's obviously going to all be changing, but it depends if you want to use it in that way or not, I think.
That's a good response.
Hiya.
So it's interesting nowadays, and sometimes you do schedule retreats. I guess for the UK audience, what is the best time for you, the most response and the clicks anywhere?
About 7:30 in the morning, actually. Yeah. So I think when people wake up, they, I guess, maybe look at their phones or on their commute to work. So actually, when we don't do it as often, I should do it much more. But yeah, scheduling tweets really early in the morning, probably between 6:30 and 8. I would say. Actually, I've woken up before and on my phone it's gone crazy, and there's just people having debates about something, and which is, yeah, you're like, oh, okay. Obviously, was interesting. I think around, obviously during the daytime, most people are at work and stuff, so you do still get interaction, but you're only going to get it from those people who are obviously able to kind of keep following. And I think maybe around 9 o'clock at night I think that's right, for the US. And then I guess you've got Australian, so Australian, US and UK and India kind of the main countries that tend to read The Guardian, in high numbers anyway.
So do you retweet the same news in the morning for the US audience? Or is it a different link?
No, it can be the same length. I mean, you can tweet out the same story loads of different times. I think it's just about how you tweet it out. So you don't want to say the same headline all the time because that gets boring and people won't be interested in it. But if you pick out a particular sentence in the piece and then tweet that out, and you can use this website called bitly.com, so that's bitly.com, and that shortens the link for you, which makes it look nicer.
Captures analytics as well.
Huh?
And captures analytics.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do you ever consider search engine optimization in the text itself, or do you just write the blog in the best prose possible and hope that there's enough of the words so that in a Google search you'd find it, or do you ever try and add in certain words more often?
So we SEO headlines stand first, which is the one below the headline, and picture captions. That's kind of main Guardian policy. So I guess within the text itself, we don't really tend to, because I think the main SEO really only affects like the headline stand first and picture caption. That's kind of, I think, how it works for us anyway. And so as long as you've got the keywords there, then you're fine. In the text, no, don't really. But yeah, SEO definitely, it does work, and it's good to, you can, if you use Google Trends, you can type in different words and it will say how much those words are cited and used and searched. So that's quite a good way of thing. If you're struggling between using the word university, an institution or something, and then if you type in both of them, you'll see a massive difference where the university, the spike will be huge, and so you think, okay, more people are going to search for that, so you put that in the headline. So that's quite a good way. But sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, I think I'd kind of avoid, well, we do anyway, I think it's different for personal blogs, but avoid phrases like public engagement, even though we all know what it is, a lot of people don't. So I think just make it as clear as possible in the headline. You can then use public engagement, well, I would then use public engagement in the stand first, which then explains the headline, but kind of refrain from using academic language. When you write for me, in your own blogs, obviously, you know, that's fine. Do what you want in that way, because you know your readership, you know who you're aiming it at. But I think for us, because we're in a global organisation, we're not just writing for, these pieces aren't just published for people who are in higher education or interested in higher education. They're for everyone, and it has to be the same standard that any piece is published on the whole site. So, yeah.
Is there any guide you would recommend for a novice blogger? I had 2 attempts to launch blogs in 2000 and taken them both down, so I'm happy with it. So is there any...
A guide, did you say?
A guide as to
how to set up your own blog.
a novice blogger's guide.
Yeah, I haven't actually come across any. I guess it's because, pardon?
I think LSE has some guides.
Oh, really?
And they have about tweeting and blogging and those kind of things.
Yeah, I thought, because LSE have LSE Impact blog is quite a good one to follow as well, and yeah, they have loads of specialist blogs. So yeah, I'm sure they have a lot of advice on there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got there's another blog, blogging for stories, which I've run, so I've advertised myself here, but that's got a little bit of a guide about sort of blogging, and although it's designed for stories, it's fairly open to everyone. So blogging for historians, just Google that.
Any more questions?
Okay. I'm sure you all would like to join me in thanking Claire for a very interesting and fascinating hour. Thank you.